Every near-death experience is different. Different person, different cause, different culture, different belief, and yet across thousands of documented accounts, from medieval monks to modern cardiac surgeons, from children in rural India to executives in New York hospital rooms, one element appears with a consistency that researchers have spent decades trying to account for. Not the tunnel, not the deceased relatives, not the life review, the light. More specifically, the presence within the light. A being, conscious, aware, communicating, something that every person who encounters it struggles to describe, not because there is nothing to say, but because the experience exceeds every word available for it. Something that produces, in people who were moments before in agony or terror or complete unconsciousness, a single overwhelming response. The most profound love they have ever experienced. This is what we know about the being of light. Descriptions consistently emphasize its radiant, luminous quality, sometimes a brilliant white or golden light that, unlike sunlight or any artificial light, does not hurt the eyes. This detail appears again and again across accounts that have no connection to each other, from accounts recorded in the 7th century to accounts recorded last year. Light that should blind, that by every physical law should be painful or overwhelming, that is instead described as warm, welcoming, and completely comfortable to look at. Light that feels alive. Pam Reynolds described it as vast and warm. Eben Alexander described the core as a presence of pure light that was simultaneously the source of everything and somehow personally aware of him. Howard Storm, who arrived at the light through darkness and terror rather than peace, described its appearance as the most beautiful thing he had ever seen in a life that had been entirely dedicated to beauty as an art professor. The entity's identity varies widely across accounts, reflecting the experiencer's cultural, religious, or personal framework. Studies of near-death experiences have documented interpretations ranging from God and Jesus to angels, the higher self, or figures like Yama from Hinduism. A Christian sees Jesus, a Hindu encounters Yama, an atheist encounters a presence with no name. What doesn't vary across every culture, every century, every individual is the feeling it produces, and that consistency is what researchers find most difficult to explain away. People report telepathic communication with this being, not language, not sound, but a direct transfer of understanding that many describe as containing more information than language could ever convey. Complete thoughts, complete understanding, delivered instantly and received completely. Eben Alexander described it as a flow of communication that bypassed words entirely and landed as absolute knowing. Anita Morjani described receiving an understanding of her entire life, why she had developed cancer, what she had come to learn, not as an explanation delivered in sentences, but as a sudden and total comprehension that arrived all at once. What the being communicates varies by person, but 3 messages appear across accounts with a frequency that researchers have documented carefully. The first, you are loved, not conditionally, not partially, completely, and without reservation, in a way that no human relationship has ever approximated. People who describe themselves as having felt unloved their entire lives describe the experience of encountering the being of light as the first time they understood what love actually was, not what humans do with love, what love actually is at its source. The second, you are not being judged. The life review when it happens in the presence of the being, is not experienced as trial or punishment. It is experienced as understanding. Every person who has ever given an account of reviewing their life in the presence of the being has described the same thing, not a verdict, but a seeing. Here is what happened. Here is what it meant. Here is who you affected and how. No condemnation, pure comprehension. The third, it is not your time. Most encounters with the being of light end with this message, in one form or another. The person is told, sometimes in words, sometimes in pure knowing, that they must return, that there is more to do, that this is not the end of their particular story, and almost universally, they don't want to go. The emotional impact is profound. Many near-death experiencers say it is the most loving presence they have ever encountered, transcending anything in their earthly experience. Being told to leave it, even to return to life, to people they love, to a body that is waiting for them, is experienced as loss. This is where the being of light becomes genuinely difficult to explain through conventional neuroscience. The most common skeptical response to near-death experience accounts is cultural contamination. People have absorbed religious imagery from their upbringing, and their dying brain reconstructs it. But this explanation cannot account for the cross-cultural consistency of the being of light specifically, because the cultural frameworks are so different. A devout Christian and a committed atheist describe the same overwhelming love from the same overwhelming presence. A Thai Buddhist and a Kenyan farmer and a New York cardiologist describe the same feeling of being completely known and completely accepted by something that exists beyond ordinary human experience. Children's accounts of near-death experiences are similar to adults, despite children being far less strongly affected by religious and cultural influences about death. A 5-year-old who has never encountered religious imagery describing unconditional love from a being of pure light is not drawing on cultural contamination. They are describing something they experienced. Of 302 people who responded to Dr. Jeffrey Long's NDER-F survey, 29% saw familiar beings and 25.8% saw unfamiliar beings. Of those who saw beings, the highest percentage of familiar beings were blood relatives at 25.9%, followed by religious figures at 22.9%. The specific identity shifts, the quality of the presence, the love, the acceptance, the knowing does not. Perhaps the most verifiable aspect of the being of light is not what it is, but what it produces. The transformation in people who encounter it is documented, consistent, and permanent. Many patients who have come into contact with the loving white light describe the experience of overwhelming love as their dominant experience, and the effects of this encounter last for decades. Fear of death disappears completely. This is the single most reported after effect across all near-death experience research. People who were terrified of dying before their experience describe having no fear of death whatsoever afterwards. Not resignation, not peace made with the inevitable. The fear itself is simply gone, replaced by a certainty that is, by their account, more solid than any other knowledge they possess. The second transformation, relationships become everything. Material success, professional achievement, status, money. People consistently describe these things becoming genuinely irrelevant after an encounter with the being of light, not reduced in importance, irrelevant. What replaces them is a focus on connection, on love, on being present with the people around them. Howard Storm left a distinguished academic career. Anita Moorjani left a life defined by fear and performance. Eben Alexander left a career built on the certainty that consciousness was entirely physical. They all arrived at the same place. Not the same beliefs exactly, not the same religion or framework or language for what happened to them, but the same orientation toward love, toward presence, toward the understanding that what matters is not what you accumulate, but who you were to the people around you. Many readers appear to be enamored by the supernatural sound of these reports, but critics sometimes charge that similar sightings may indicate nothing more than the presence of common brain chemistry among humans, perhaps simply what happens to the human brain when it nears personal extinction. That is a legitimate scientific hypothesis. It has not been disproven, but it also has not been proven, and it does not account for the verified details, the conversations heard through walls, the shoes on window ledges, the surgical tools described by blind women, the sisters identified from photographs that arrived months later. The being of light may be the brain's final production, or it may be something the brain is briefly capable of perceiving that it cannot perceive under normal conditions. Beyond Clinical does not know which of those is true. Neither does anyone else. What we know is this: thousands of people from every culture and century that has left written records have described encountering the same presence in the same place. They describe it with the same inadequate words. They return from it the same way, changed, unafraid, oriented toward love in a way that persists for the rest of their lives. Whatever the being of light is, it does something real, something measurable in human behavior, something that leaves a permanent mark on every person it touches. Beyond Clinical follows the evidence, and the evidence for the being of light is not one account, it is 10,000 of them, saying the same thing, in different languages, across different centuries, with different names for what they found at the end of the tunnel, but the same feeling every single time.